Aloha. I'm so happy to have everybody here with us today. I have a real treat in store for you with a wonderful author that we're going to speak to. And I just want to let you know that remember to always check the show notes because we've got information there about her and ways that you can learn more and contact her and whatever you'd like to do. And there's also always something special in there that you can get from me when you look at the show notes. So be sure that you do that. So today we have Edy Nathan with us, and she is the author of a wonderful book called It's Grief that has so much information in it. And I love the book. It's really, really nice. So Edy, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about you and what motivated you to write this wonderful book?
Grief is everywhere. We might not even realize that it is, but it is, right? And with that in mind, because of my own history of loss, different traumas that occurred, and what I call the big G's and the little G's, I had been collecting stories and perspectives, and as a therapist and having a full practice in the field of grief and loss and trauma, thought, I want to take the life experience and put it into a book that allows people to understand that grief is not just about the loss of a loved one, and that's a very hard journey, as you know, and you've shared with me for sure, and I've experienced. And grief is everywhere, and it can strike us and hit us in ways that we don't expect. And so this book is about the journey of the self through grief, and that there's not a way of getting over it. There's not a way of just saying, I'm going to wipe my hands and be done, but rather it's a journey, and you walk with it, you dance with it.
I love that dance aspect. That was just really special when I was reading that. I thought, oh, she gets it, was really wonderful. That is such an important point right now, that generally a lot of times when somebody says something about grief, they go, well, who died? And especially in our society today, with the extremes that are happening from opposite ends of just about any belief or anything that you think about, we're all being challenged with that. And some of the challenges are really big, and we're grieving over how things are different. And change is happening, whether we want it to or not. And a lot of grief is involved there. So I like the idea that you're not just talking about people who die, but grief in general.
Yeah. The idea of the big G's and the little G's, the big G's are, I think exactly how we think of them. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a limb, the loss of the role as a caregiver or caretaker. When that role is taken away, there's a sense not only of grief, but role confusion, which I talk about in the book. Its grief is written for the layman. It's not written necessarily with a lot of psychological terms, though it's psychologically minded. And the idea of suffering from big G's, we all have them. And then there are the little G's, and those little G's can start with something that seems like it's a nothing. And I'm going to this is going to sound like a nothing. You get a haircut, and it's not a good haircut, but what that haircut does, maybe it triggers something within you that's been buried, and all of a sudden you're feeling things that you didn't think that you would be experiencing. And it seems trite, but that could be a little G, and those little G's can then turn into, if they're not dealt with, a big G.
That's right. But what a great example. I had a little G haircut at one point that I just didn't know what to do. It's like it changed my whole identity. I had told the person what I wanted her to do. She was somebody new, and she did what she wanted to do instead of what I wanted. And I didn't look like me at all when I looked in the mirror and she was done. And I kept thinking, hair grows, it's going to grow out. I don't have to stay this way forever. But I did have to live with it for a while because she did a substantial cut on it that wasn't what I had asked for. And
it can sound trite, but when it goes to some core part of us,
mhm.
and that can then be a trigger, and we're not even aware that it could be a trigger. And it's being able to be aware of the potential for the little G's, and how when they're not dealt with, they're not taken care of. To be able to take, that moment in time, share it, write about it, talk about it, find some way to be creative with, the bad haircut, so to speak, because learning how to deal with the little G's will help you and us, every person, learn how to better deal with and cope with the big G's.
That's right. And I think in my case, when that happened with me, I did a lot of thinking about it. I realized by exploring it, the triggers from my childhood that made it so significant. Because my mother was not a grooming person. She just wanted my hair short, and in those days it was called a pixie haircut. So I had very little hair, and she wanted it that way. So she didn't have to think about it. She didn't have to look at me if I didn't wash it or whatever. It wouldn't bother her. And it was devastating to me because I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. And she always thought at a certain age that women have to have their hair in a certain way, and that older ladies couldn't have long hair. And so I think it's kind of well, my hair's long. What can I say?
It is long.
It's not going to be short.
It's an ownership, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is. And it really got me thinking about a lot of things. And that I love the description of that being a little G. Makes such perfect sense.
Yeah. And you take that little G, and grief is like a hero's journey. You go from that which you knew, the ordinary life, and you leave. You have a departure because something happens. There's a hiccup, or there's a catastrophe, or there's a war, or there's a pandemic, or there's a loss of a loved one. And are they all on the same rung? No, but they all create the same potential journey, which is something has shifted within you. That shift causes you to question who you are, what you're doing. And then you are led into the metaphorical cave of having to face the parts of you, or the shadowy parts of the self, like the mother, or like, the father, or the male figure, and deal with how they have created an obstacle for you in your life, and what the magnitude of what they represented to you in your life might have been. And you tangle with them in the cave. They're kind of like phantoms, if you will. And then you come out of the cave and you're forever changed, because you did the dance with them, you tangled with them, and you come out transformed. And you also come out knowing a little bit more about who your friends are and who your allies are. And though you might look the same, talk the same, you're forever changed.
That's for sure. And I love your analogy with the dance. That it was so interesting reading about that in your book. Can you tell us some more about dancing with grief?
Certainly. So the subtitle to It's Grief is The Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. And I see grief as being something you must partner with. And what do you, when you partner, I think of a dance. And sometimes the partnership in a dance is wonky. Sometimes it's gorgeous. Sometimes you're doing a waltz and it just has a beautiful rhythm. And sometimes you're doing a jagged twist. And that when you partner with grief, you're saying, I'm not afraid of you. I know that sometimes it's going to be okay, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's going to take me down just into the depths and the darkness that I just didn't even expect to be in ever. And I see it as a dance because there is an elegance to grief. It's profound, it's primal, and it catapults you into a place you could never imagine.
What a perfect description. I was just thinking how fortunate the people are that get to come to you with their grief and work in it. It's a different way to look at things. And a lot of people think grieving is negative, but you have, I think the dance aspect makes it a positive approach where you can breathe with it. That a lot of
That's
times
right.
we just get
It
so
is. It's
tied.
breathing with it. That's right. That's right. It's moving with it, breathing with it. Saying I'm not afraid, because right when we're struck by grief and the profound aspects of it and the pain of it, all we want to do is avoid it. And what happens when we avoid is it makes whatever we're avoiding get bigger. And so the big 100-pound gorilla of grief that might be on your shoulders becomes a 500-pound gorilla, a 1,000-pound gorilla. And you're just walking and you're embedded in it and with it. When you're not afraid of it, you can step aside, you can look at it, you can see it, you can engage with it. When it's on your back, it's so much harder.
Yeah. Yeah. When, excuse me, when you know it and recognize it, it makes a huge, huge difference. And I think we all know that we all grieve for a significant part of our lives with all the different things that you grieve about. There's lots of different things, and you can ignore it and try to bury it and have it fester, or you can recognize it and send some love that way.
That's right. Yeah. Embrace it. Fight it, because you do need to be in touch with your warrior as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I will use, the idea of the archetypes as techniques to help focus on, kind of what you need to be calling on to help you in the dance.
I love those archetypes. I was reading through that, I thought, oh, what a great way to express these things, because people can relate to this and see and understand what you're saying so easily with the way that you describe them. Can you give us an example of a couple of the common archetypes?
So let's first describe what an archetype is.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
We don't, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's not like we walk around talking about archetypes unless you're kind of within a group of people who know that and understand, that the archetype is a symbol that is a universal symbol. So for example, you and I were just talking about mother. If we mention the word mother, I don't care where you're from. I don't care what kind of person you are. I don't care what your background is. If you speak English, if you don't speak English, you will know what mother is. And that is an archetype. It is a universal symbol. So when I mention mother or father, we know what that symbol is. We understand who they are, what their role is, or maybe not. Maybe it wasn't a role, but maybe it was a wished for role. And so we understand that there are archetypes of the mother, the father, the warrior, the trickster, the fool. And if your audience is familiar at all with the tarot, some of the images from the tarot are very much archetypal. And it is the idea of using images that are universal to all because grief itself is universal to all.
That's right. That's so perfect. That was when I was studying English at the university, the archetypes were so helpful to me because you could figure things out by using the archetypes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So when I think of the warrior, warriors, the archetype of the warrior is that, they're solid. They like to fight for something that they believe in. Sometimes they don't want to fight in something they believe in. They just want to fight. And that might be more of the shadowy side of the warrior. But the warrior needs a war to feel complete. And grief becomes, like the war that the warrior engages with. The thing about archetypes is that they can move in and out. And you might need a warrior archetype to say, okay, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight with you. I'm going to dance with you. Because if you look at, the engagement of fencing, for example, which is almost like a warrior's stance, with that sword in hand, it is as powerful as it is elegant, as it is strikingly potent in the way that it can strike back.
That's right. Wow, that's so perfect. Oh, my mind's just spinning ahead here. Oh, yes, this archetype and that archetype. So it's just an easy, I'm not sure easy is the right word, but it's a way of being able to describe things that it's not necessarily easy to describe, so that on a universal way that people can relate to them.
Yeah, and it's more precise for perhaps what you might want to call on. And it's grief. I've got a whole bunch of archetypes that I describe. Some I go into, with greater depth, and others I give you an idea of them. And if you're really interested, there's so much on the internet to read about and to learn in terms of these archetypes. But whether you utilize them or not, I'm a big advocate of finding ways to be precise about what's going on with you. And grief muddies our minds. There's no doubt. Grief shatters us, takes us down, splits our hearts, takes our guts and turns them all over the place. And it's often difficult to find the precise words. But if you can find one precise word to describe, or one precise moment to tangle with that grief, it can help actually your mind become more precise and clear in how it's going to work with the grief that has presented itself.
That's right. Yeah, it was just reminding me of how I've had 2 husbands die, and when the first one died, my big thing was I just felt kind of blank. It was like I couldn't think very well. I couldn't relate to things, and nothing seemed to make sense. And I didn't really talk much because I just was blank is the only way I can describe it. And having something like the archetypes, if somebody could have had a conversation with me at that time, I think it would have helped me wake up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you only need, one at a time, because our minds can't, when you're grieving, you're muddled for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really hard to read. It's hard to learn. It's hard to sometimes relate. You may not be sleeping. You may only want to sleep. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that the body responds to grieving. Sometimes people can listen to something and not necessarily read something. And if you are reading, maybe just read a line or 2 lines or 5 lines. It doesn't matter, and you don't need to do it alone. You can find a group depending on the kind of person you are. Are you an ambivert, which is kind of like a little bit of an extrovert and an introvert all in one? or are you an introvert or an extrovert? Based on who you are and your personality style, that will also help you determine the best help for you.
Mhm. That's right. Because and often we're so busy living life that we don't really have a good idea of who we are, you
That's
know,
right.
and the getting hit with big grief, the big G's, will knock you down enough that it's like everything's shaken up and you don't really are not aware of how to put the puzzle back together again.
That's right. That's right. And it's interesting that you say puzzle, because I use the idea of a mosaic throughout the book, and that we are creating a mosaic, and the mosaic has gotten fractured. And so it doesn't look the same. And the mosaic that you are building is going to look different than the mosaic you had. And throughout life, that mosaic, the mosaic of our personas and ourselves, are forever changing. And if you buy into that a little bit, then it makes those transitions so much easier. Are they ever easy? No, not really, but a little bit easier for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the mosaic is such a beautiful image for that, because we're all made up of pieces and parts. And when you can rearrange them, you create different things. All the different pieces are. I have a friend that would make mosaics with mirrors. So you not only were seeing the pieces, but you're seeing your reflection at the same time. And so it would be constantly changing depending on what angle you were looking at it, what the light was, so many things that represented that nothing stays the same. We
Yeah,
can't go through life without being touched.
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's an opportunity to be in discovery of the self, right? And to say, okay, I didn't even know this about me, and I'm learning this about me, and I'm really excited. And to be excited about some shift within the self while you're grieving is okay. And it's really important to give yourself permission, wherever you are on the grief scope, to have moments where you're okay. And it doesn't mean that you are not sad for your loss, not ruptured in some way because of your loss, but it does mean that you have some appreciation for some insight or growth or new relationship with a friend or with a religious person, and those new relationships will often develop after a loss, and they're unexpected, and they're unexpected gifts.
Oh yeah, it's being able to be open is pretty magnificent. I knew one of the things that I did after Jacques died was I made up my mind that I wasn't going to open myself up to a deep relationship like that again, because it was just too hard to have it end. And I couldn't imagine ever being with somebody else. And I was so shocked when I met somebody and fell in love, and it was wonderful. And I was glad that I was able to not stick by these decisions that I had made that weren't really based on anything that was serving me, but what I thought that I should be in society thinking at that point.
That's right.
I think a lot of times we let society dictate things to us that we don't need to do that.
How often have people, been told, you mean you're not over it yet?
Oh, I
You mean you're not
yeah.
done? You mean, what do you, it's been 6 months. Come on, it's time. And that's, the loss of a spouse of 30 or 40 years or 10 years or 2 years. It doesn't matter. Why is that messaging there? Because grief, once you've lost someone, it changes its framework and the way you hold it. But it's not gone, because you honor the person that you've lost or the thing you've lost by remembering peacefully.
Yes. And you don't need to worry about what anybody else thinks. That was a hard lesson for me. That was really
Yeah, it's a
hard.
good lesson.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
one. I had a situation where I was very involved. Both Jacques and I were very involved in the community. It's like everybody knew us. And there were things that were coming up after he died that I really wanted to attend, but I didn't want to go by myself. And Jacques and I had a friend who also was a doctor, that whenever he'd go in the hospital or say, he wasn't our doctor, but we were always running into him all the time. And so he knew exactly what was going on. He knew us, knew our relationship. He loved to come to the theater, and he was just a really nice guy. And he called me one day and he goes, I know how involved you are in the community, and I know that it's probably going to be hard for you to go out by yourself. So if there's any time that you're going someplace that you would like an escort, I would be happy to escort you. And I thought that was the kindest, most beautiful thing for him to say. He certainly didn't have to do that, but he did. And so I took him up on it. So there was something that was coming, and I really didn't want to go by myself because I didn't want to get cornered and have people going, oh, like you just said, aren't you over it yet? Or, strange things that people say when they don't know how to talk to you.
That's right.
And we weren't like holding hands. We weren't doing anything that made it look like we were a couple. He just essentially gave me a ride there, and we were talking about the event and that sort of thing. And at one point I heard some women talking behind me. I think that they thought that I couldn't hear them. And they were saying, can you believe that she's dating already? He just barely died, and here she is out gallivanting around. And that's just disgusting. It's disgraceful. How could she do something like that? She must not have really loved him. I couldn't believe the garbage that was coming out of these mouths of these women who didn't know me. They knew who I was, but they didn't know me. And to say things like that, I thought, okay, I'm going home. I'm not going anyplace ever again.
I'm really sorry that happened to you. So sorry that happened to you. And yet I'm so happy that we're talking about it.
Yes.
Because it's messaging that needs to get out there.
That's right.
There's no one right way to speak to someone who's lost a loved one or has, gone into a depressive state because of the onslaught of grief, situational grief that has occurred. Grief does not follow any kind of line, and when someone makes a comment like this, it's because of their discomfort with loss. And we can be the teachers, anyone who's lost someone, and come to a place of I'm living with this, and I'm okay enough, and I can be happy and I can laugh without guilt or shame. Those are our teachers, and they're everywhere. And so I love the idea that anyone who's lost a loved one or has experienced the big G kind of grief, that you pay it forward, and you pay it forward by teaching, by comforting, by being curious, and by allowing for the people around them, when they have losses, to grieve in their own way and in their own time.
That's right. That's right. What a better place the world would be if people got that message and practiced it.
Right.
It would just be wonderful.
It is so very true. Yeah.
And I can't say things like that happened all the time. That was kind of an isolated thing, but it was very traumatic. And I think a lot of times people just don't realize what they're doing when they say things like to a young mother who's lost her baby, that well, you can have another one, you're young,
Yes, right.
I feel like saying, how dare you say that? How could you possibly let that come out of your mouth? And a lot of it comes just because people don't know what to say. And as you said, we kind of need to lead by example and kind of share with these people, you know, it would be so much nicer if you would have said something like this to me, or maybe you don't understand that, you know, I'm just a person and I'm just at the same event that you're at, and that's all there is to it. You know, it, judgment, I think never serves us when we judge somebody else. And it's easy
True.
for us to jump into the judgment back when somebody does something like that to us. And if we can just take a breath and step back and just forgive them, and move forward on our own. And we don't have to be their best friend, but we can.
That's true.
The act of forgiving them, I think, is pretty significant in allowing yourself to feel better about the situation too.
It's true. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, right?
Mhm.
It's about finding a way so that you're not holding on to your own judgment or your own angst or your own the hit that you know you felt. To forgive is to be able to say, I'm not going to hold on to this. Whatever was going on for them was going on for them. And that's on them, not on me. And I'm going to just move on. So I'm going to just think out, they must be in their own kind of pain if that's where they needed to be. And those are the kinds of comments they needed to make.
That's right. That's exactly right. Wow. That I think I could probably write a whole book on how to interact with people dealing with grief, both sides, you know, the people that don't know what to say and the people that don't know what to respond with or how to do
That's right.
that.
Yeah.
Because it's
Sometimes
something
I don't
nobody
know what to
teaches.
say, right? No one, and sometimes just saying, I don't know what to say. I want you to know I'm here no matter what. And I'm a phone call away. I will touch base with you. And if it's too much, just let me know. And if you don't know, that's okay. I'm just around.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what you need. And I don't think that you know what you need. And, and that's okay. And we can be in this place of, I don't know what you need. And I don't know what, and you don't know what you need. And we can be in that place together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a liminal space of just not knowing. It's just floating and saying, I'll float with you.
Yeah.
I'll just float with you.
And you know, that feels really good when somebody does, when somebody can just be there. You don't have to talk.
That's right.
Sometimes,
That's right.
A lot of times I think the griever is put in a situation of taking care of other people who don't know what to do or say.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got enough to deal with that without having them have to take care of you too. So when you recognize that sort of situation is coming up, you can, knowing that is what do they call it? Forewarned is forearmed, that you can deal with something better. And I know one of the things that I suggest, if you don't know what to say, you can say, I don't know what to say, but can I sit with you? Can I hold your hand? Do you want a hug? You know, something like that. As opposed to not saying anything or saying something like, I'm sorry for your loss, which I got to the point where I forgive people when they say that. But it took a while because I thought, why did you just say, have a nice day? It just seems so flip and meaningless and I'm sure that people that say that don't mean that. But to me, when I was hearing it over and over again, that's how I was accepting it. And I realized that I had to get over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when someone says, I'm sorry for your loss, they're in their own helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel inadequate. And so they're going to something that may not be whatever the right thing is. I don't know that there's a right thing or a wrong thing. I think the worst thing someone can say, we've already spoken of, the woman who loses a baby, and she's told, well, don't worry, you're young, you'll get over it. And it's not being with that person in the present moment. And that kind of comment is a comment of helplessness for sure. It's also a comment that doesn't really connect with who that person is or the grief that they're experiencing.
Yeah, it doesn't. And when you can start a conversation, when you can have a conversation with someone, it can change both your worlds.
That's right.
It can make such a huge difference. I know in the case with me, when I got together with the man that I ended up marrying after Jacques died, we'd been together for a while. We weren't married yet. I had a hard time getting married again because I didn't feel unmarried to my husband who died. And we were someplace and he introduced me to somebody. He said something about me being Jacques' ex-wife, or Jacques was my ex-husband. And I said, excuse me? No, he's not. He's my husband who died. And it led to a really deep, valuable conversation because he didn't think he was saying anything wrong at all. He wasn't intending to dishonor or harm or insult or anything. That wasn't there. It was just what he called him because I wasn't married to him anymore. So he saw that as an ex. And it was, fortunately, we were able to talk about that. It was really important to be able to talk about that. He never said it again, but I thought,
I'm sure that he didn't.
Yeah.
Not if you had a really deep conversation about it. And that's where precision is so important. The precision of what the experience is for you, and that your first husband was not your ex-husband. It was not a separation of choice. It was not a separation that you wanted. It was a separation because of a dying passage of a loved one.
Yeah.
Your husband.
And I always tell people when they talk about how long do you grieve, I always tell them as long as you love the person. I love my mom and dad, and they've been gone for many, many years. And I didn't stop loving them because they died. It's the same thing with my husbands, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my friends. I've known a lot of people who died. They didn't just turn off the faucet when they died and say, oh, well, they're not here anymore, so I don't have to love them anymore. That love remains. Love always remains.
Yeah. And love, love, the kind of love that remains can be a wonderful teacher. And again, how do we pay that forward? My mom died over 20 years ago, and to this day, on the day of her death, as a way of remembering her, she loved to shop. So I might not shop, but I'll go window shopping. She loves flowers. I'll buy flowers and I'll put them in my house. And I'll say, Elizabeth, this is for you. And it's a way of bringing in her spirit, if you will, that lives within me. And I'm not going down a slippery slope. I'm saying, this is my honor. This is an honor,
It is. And it's so wonderful to be in a place where you can remember your loved ones with love, and with a smile. And I know my sister and I inherited a company that my mom and dad owned for a long, long time. The company is 62 years old this year.
Wow.
Yeah, this is kind of a big deal. And this year they got the award from the local Chamber of Commerce as the best business in town for the year. And it was
That's great.
It was really, really cool. And all I could think of is mom and dad would be so proud of the fact that we kept it in the family and that it's serving so many. It's an ambulance company, and during the pandemic and the fires in California, we were busier than we had ever been, but boy, did we help a lot of people. It was amazing what we had the opportunity to do. And I thought if Daddy were just here now to be able to soak this in, he would be so thrilled to see what he started all those years ago has turned into something so beautiful and remained.
So his company is paying him forward, and every ambulance has a little bit of your dad,
Yeah.
right? And his idea and his, creation, and how wonderful. And you get to watch that, and you get to appreciate that.
Yeah, I do. And it's wonderful. And Dad was such an icon on community service that he taught me the value of that. And people still, it's in a relatively small town. People still remember him for everything he did for the community. So the ambulance does things for the community. I don't live there anymore. I do things for that community, but I also do things for my community here and wherever I go. And whenever I do, I think, Dad taught me this. And isn't it cool? Wonderful to be able to do
it's so
this.
cool, right? Yeah, it's so cool. Definitely. There is something about what we're talking about that's so important. It has to do with the brain, and it has to do with what happens to the brain when we have gratitude, when we walk around with some form of gratitude. And when grief meets gratitude, magic can occur.
Absolutely.
And so it's finding those tiny moments when there can be some gratitude, or maybe a life that was saved because of an ambulance. And thankfully that ambulance was able to get there, and the medics were able to help, and that life and that person and that family that was around that person could, revel in the fact that that ambulance got there in time to help. And it is those little moments of gratitude that can forever change us, and to realize that the brain is an ally in this process. And it is one of our greatest helpers in managing what goes on in our amygdalas. And the amygdala is what holds emotions and holds our fears. And we have, when we're grieving, it's heavy, and there can be lightness there. And it's realizing that when we can look at something with just a little bit of a different lens, even our grief, that can open us up to healing. And
Yes.
Healing is not about forgetting. It's about learning how to remember more peacefully.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for saying that. People need to hear that and receive that message. It's fabulous. And I just realized how long we've been talking here. We probably should wrap this up. But it's so fun to talk to you. I like smiling this much. It's really nice. And I think it's really good when you're talking to people who are dealing with grief to be able to smile and show them that they can smile too. You can, reflect that toward them.
You can be grieving and smile, and you don't have to feel guilt over the smile.
Right. Absolutely.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Emily, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, lovely conversation. It was so easy. And anybody who's listening, grief is certainly a journey. It's nothing like we ever expect it to be. And yet it can teach us more about ourselves than I think just about anything else.
That's right. It's as we said earlier, we all experience it, some more than others, but it's there for everybody. And
that's right.
Ram Dass lived here in Maui, and I actually got to be with him before he died. And one of his things that he said is, we're all just walking each other home. And I just love that. I like to think of it that way.
I like that as well. Thank you so much for sharing that during this conversation. What an appropriate end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And as I said before, do look in the show notes because there's lots of information there that is help for you. And it's a wonderful thing to take advantage of. And I appreciate you joining us today and always, and hope that you'll be back and join me again next week. Thank you. Aloha.